Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki, Sharma, Upadhyay. Let's get started. "24/7 surveillance, strict control over the movement of people, innocents in detention camps, and a violent crackdown on citizens." What I just described for you are the conclusions of a United Nations report on Xinjiang. It is the biggest story today the world over. China has been found guilty of serious human rights violations. But tonight I want to tell you that the Xinjiang treatment, is no longer reserved just for the Uyghur Muslims of China. Many Chinese cities now are increasingly looking like Xinjiang. Everyone in this country is a victim of the excesses of the Communist Party. Every citizen of China is getting the Xinjiang treatment. And it's all happening in the name of pandemic prevention. The zero COVID policy looks increasingly inspired from the Xinjiang playbook. More than 100 million citizens are under lockdown in China. 100 million. Those who test positive are being forced into quarantine camps, and those who fail to comply suffer the wrath of the Chinese state. This is our cover story tonight, the ugly truth about zero COVID. China just cannot catch a break. What you just saw happen for real. There were long power cuts in Chengdu city. More than 21 million people live in the city. People at this restaurant were using hand fans and phone flashlights. They had no option. There was no electricity. And today their nightmare just got worse. There is a Wuhan virus outbreak in Chengdu. Do you know what that means in China? A sweeping lockdown. And that has been imposed in Chengdu. All 21 million people of the city will now be locked up in their homes. And their suffering is not unique. Many Chinese cities have met the same fate. Today, the world is talking about Xinjiang. A United Nations report has come out. It has confirmed what the world has long known. The Communist Party of China is the world's worst human rights offender. We'll discuss that report later. But let me tell you this. A large part of mainland China resembles Xinjiang today. For millions of people, their homes have been turned into jails, and citizens are being treated like criminals. Everyone in China today is a casualty. Everyone is suffering the excesses of the Communist Party, and everyone is getting the Xinjiang treatment. Tonight we'll show you how. We'll show you 5 videos that sum up the ugly truth of zero COVID. Let's start with China's latest lockdown orders. The latest victim, like I said, is Chengdu. It is in southern China. It's a mega city, an economic powerhouse. Its GDP is well over $250 billion, which makes Chengdu the 7th wealthiest city in China. And it's now under lockdown. Do you know how many Wuhan virus cases were found there? Not even 1,000 as of this morning. But Chinese authorities have asked all 21 million residents to stay at home. For the people of Chengdu, it's like being out of the frying pan and into the fire. Here's video number 1. It is believed to be from an apartment complex in Chengdu. A few days ago, people were crying for help there. It's hard to verify the authenticity of this video, like we say for most videos from China, but multiple news reports talk about the ordeal of the people in this region. This city, Chengdu, is the capital of the Sichuan province. This month, Sichuan has been hammered by natural disasters, a record-setting drought, a punishing heat wave that devastated power supplies, then wildfires. It's like everything that could go wrong went wrong here. Local authorities were struggling to respond to these multiple crises, and now they must impose sweeping lockdowns. And here's what a lockdown means in China: forced quarantine, harassment, and wide-ranging crackdowns. It's time for video number 2. This is from the Taiyuan city. On your screen is a foreign national. He was in a park without a mask. There were other people too in the park, other Chinese citizens who did not have a mask on. But guess who the guards went after? The foreigner. So he told them that they were being racist. And you have to see what happened next.
You're racist. You're racist. The police is coming. The police is coming. You're racist. You're racist. You're racist.
枪支把他抬出来！
You're racist. 起来，你戴个口罩。He's a racist. 戴口罩。
Here is what those guards were telling the man. In China, you speak Chinese. So that's what the foreigners go through. What about the people of China? What happens to those who are in lockdown in China? One word sums up their life: chaos. Let's show you video number 3. This is from the month of July. Sichuan's Xinjiang city was conducting mass tests. Everyone was asked to take one. Just look at what happened. Like I said, total chaos. It's an everyday story in China. People are summoned abruptly. They're made to stand in long queues and then forced to take a Wuhan virus test. There are no exceptions, because if you have to move around in China today, you'll need your latest test report. Every citizen is on the state's radar. What happens if you decide to skip a test? You face the fury of Chinese authorities. Look at video number 4. A few weeks ago, Shanghai was going through one of its worst outbreaks. Again, zero COVID orders were in place. The local police were on a hunt. They were asked to bring COVID-positive patients to quarantine. And this is how they went about it.
不是啊，我们的复核结果还没有出来。
来，拍下来，看好了。Wonderful， 好。走。你们等一下，你们我报警，你们稍等。都已经是警察了，朋友们。
The police actually broke into a house. Was that a COVID-positive patient? We cannot say for sure. The police said he tested positive. The residents of this apartment say they did not get a positive report. Either way, the Chinese state doesn't care. They spare no one, not even animals. Which brings us to our 5th and final video. And let me warn you, this could be disturbing for some viewers. Again, this is from the month of July. A family was forced to separate from their farm animals. The family was taken to a quarantine center, presumably. These are healthcare workers. Do you know what they did with the animals? They killed them. Let me once again advise viewer discretion. This video is disturbing. This is the ugly truth of zero COVID. This is not about preventing new infections or stamping out the Wuhan virus. This is about reminding the people of China just how much power the Communist Party wields. And as horrible as they are, the lockdowns pale in comparison to what's happening in Xinjiang. Almost 1 million Uyghur Muslims have been put in labor camps. Some have been forcibly sterilized, some are subjected to state-sponsored rape, others are experimented on, all in the name of counter-terrorism. The world community knows all of this. We've seen the pictures, we've read the reports, but now we have official confirmation if we really needed it. The United Nations has published an assessment on Xinjiang. It calls out China's human rights abuses. We'll get to the report in a bit, but first some background. This report has been in the works for 3 years. The UN has been talking to activists, Uyghurs living in exile, also survivors of these labor camps. But the whole process was taking too long. Many feared that China would kill the report. In the month of May this year, those fears grew. UN Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet travelled to Xinjiang. Her words and body language were not inspiring. You see, Bachelet was a human rights chief. You don't expect them to be diplomatic. You expect them to be honest and outspoken. More cop, less diplomat. But she was not like that. She even praised the Chinese government in Beijing. And since then, we've been waiting for this report. Michelle Bachelet's term ended on Wednesday, so naturally it was time to publish it. Interesting fact. She released the report 13 minutes before her term ended. Talk about cutting it close, 13 minutes. Which brings us to the document itself. Does it meet the world's expectations? Well, yes and no. The report is very explicit about what China is doing in Xinjiang, evidence of torture, ethnic and religious discrimination and sexual violence. I'll read out the key findings. This is what it says. Serious human rights violations have been committed in Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region in the context of the government's application of counter-terrorism and counter-extremism strategies. So human rights violations were committed. The report confirms this. But do they constitute crimes against humanity? Now, this is one step above rights violations, crimes against humanity. They include things like genocide, ethnic cleansing, summary executions, and massacres. Do China's actions amount to crimes against humanity? Listen to what the report says, and I'm quoting, "The extent of arbitrary and discriminatory detention of members of Uyghur and other predominantly Muslim groups may constitute international crimes, in particular crimes against humanity." There are two ways of looking at this. One, the report is not conclusive. It only mentions the possibility of crimes against humanity. Or two, a possibility is enough. Remember, we're talking about crimes against humanity, about genocide and ethnic cleansing. Even the possibility, the mere possibility, is terrifying. In that context, this UN report is damning. It goes beyond anything the United Nations has said so far. The question is, what do they plan to do about it? Well, the report has something called recommendations. It appears at the bottom of the document. There are 13 recommendations for the Chinese government. I'll read out some of them. Release all persons held arbitrarily in prisons. Clarify the whereabouts of missing Uyghurs. Investigate rights violations in the so-called training camps. Provide reparations to victims of rights violations. Clarify reports of mosque destructions. Those are just 5 out of the 13 recommendations. Our question is this a joke? Does the United Nations think asking politely is the solution? Now, don't get us wrong, we're all for reformative justice, but I do not think that applies to genocidal regimes and dictators. Some things are beyond redemption. This report also has 3 recommendations for the international community. Businesses have been asked to be more careful to study whether their products could be complicit in the Xinjiang crackdown. Countries have been asked to not deport Uyghurs to China. Listen to what it says. States should further refrain from returning members of Uyghur and other predominantly Muslim minorities to China who are at the risk of refoulement. That's a message for Turkey and company. They deport Uyghurs to curry favors with China, and chances are they will keep doing it because this report lacks 2 things. A, it is not legally binding, and B, the language is just not strong enough. You cannot raise the possibility of crimes against humanity and then ask the same government to resolve it. If you do, people will brush aside the report. China, for one, is calling it a patchwork of falsehoods.
The assessment is a patchwork of false information that serves as political tools for the US and other Western countries to strategically use Xinjiang to contain China. The UN Human Rights Office made up the assessment based on the political scheme of some foreign anti-China forces. It violates the obligations of the UN Human Rights Office and its principles of universality, objectivity, non-selectivity, and non-politicization.
Nothing surprising there, pretty much as expected from China. But this report raises questions about the United Nations Human Rights Office. What exactly is their job? Is it to protect human rights at all cost? Or is it to navigate big power rivalries? I would say the former. Human rights officials cannot be diplomatic. They cannot be influenced by politics. Just think about it. China would have lashed out at this report anyway. So why water down your assessment? Why not call the crackdown what it is? A genocide. In fact, many countries have already done that. Canada, the US, and some countries in Europe have declared China's actions a genocide. So what is the United Nations afraid of? If watchdogs pull their punches, who can we count on? So while this report is encouraging, it must be the start of a larger campaign. The United Nations must put pressure on businesses to stay out of Xinjiang. It must support sanctions on China, because these diplomatic assessments alone will not deter the Communist Party. I'm talking about diplomatic considerations. India is trying to pull off a balancing act yet again. The West wants it to help turn Russia into a pariah. But India is still trying to keep a foot in the door. Indian soldiers are participating in a major drill in Russia. These are war games. Do you know who else is participating? The People's Liberation Army of China, the PLA. A total of 13 countries are participating. We have a list: Azerbaijan, Algeria, Armenia, Belarus, India, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Laos, China, Mongolia, Nicaragua, Syria, and Tajikistan. Russia's intentions are quite clear. It wants to show the world that its military still remains strong, and despite the war in Ukraine, Russia enjoys military support from multiple allies. But what's in it for India? Why is India participating? And what about China's participation in these exercises? Should Indian forces be there at all? Our next report tells you about India's tricky balancing act.
This moment was a big diplomatic coup for Russia. Today, militaries from 13 countries gathered in Russia's far east. Some 50,000 soldiers, 140 airplanes and 60 naval ships are part of these drills. For the next 7 days, they'll be engaged in wide-ranging drills. This is how they kicked off day 1. The Indian military has also sent a contingent. It isn't even the first time India's defense forces have taken part in this exercise. But this could be their most awkward engagement. The first problem is Russia's intensifying battle with the West. Russia is using these drills to embarrass the US and allies.
Today is a significant event for our countries, for our armed forces. The Strategic Command and Staff Exercise Vostok 2022 begins. An event of this magnitude is unique in many ways. The scope of the exercises, the composition of the participating states, the number of personnel, weapons, and special military equipment involved indicates the increased role and importance of the joint training of our armed forces.
Moscow is gaining more than that from these drills. Russia is signaling the West that it still has strong and loyal allies. The People's Liberation Army of China is among them. And that's the other worry for India. The Chinese forces have sent over 2,000 troops for these drills. China's presence has made India's position more tricky. That's because Russia and China plan to conduct a provocative drill during these exercises. The exercise in the Sea of Japan has alarmed Tokyo. The US has been concerned too. In a statement, the White House signaled that India's participation bothers them. What was New Delhi's response? India tried to reassure its Western allies.
That India has been regularly participating in multilateral exercises in Russia, along with a number of other countries. I understand there will be only army participation in the Vostok exercises this year.
Yes, it is only the Indian army this time. India has chosen to stay away from the maritime component of these drills. New Delhi hasn't sent any warships for these drills. India's participation remains restricted to just two areas: strategic command and staff drills. Experts say this selective participation is an attempt towards striking a balance. India wants to keep Russia within its sphere of influence, but at the same time it wants to avoid hurting Japan. But it also reveals the limits of India's multi-alignment approach. The plan seems to have worked for now, but as Russia gets closer to China, New Delhi will remain under pressure to pick sides. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Disasters have a way of bringing people together. They forget politics, they forget the past, they're united by compassion for each other. Sometimes that rubs off on foreign policy too. Take India and Pakistan, for example. Relations hit rock bottom after 2019. Even trade ties were downgraded. But this week, there were murmurs of a thaw. Faint, but important murmurs. And the reason is the floods in Pakistan. They have affected more than 33 million Pakistanis. Around 1,300 people have lost their lives. Many more have been displaced. Pakistan alone cannot defeat this crisis. It needs assistance from abroad. In fact, Foreign Minister Bilawal Bhutto Zardari has admitted this. He appealed for foreign help. The question is, do they also want that help from India? So far, we've got mixed signals. Look at this tweet by Pakistan's finance minister. More than one international agency has approached the government to allow them to bring food items from India through the land border. The government will take the decision to allow imports or not based on supply shortage position after consulting its coalition partners and key stakeholders. In other words, talks are on, but Pakistan's foreign ministry has a different version. Their spokesman says no such proposal is under discussion. So which one is it? Does Pakistan want imports from India or not? Multiple factors will influence Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif's decision. Number one, of course, is politics. Imran Khan is breathing down Sharif's neck. If elections were to be held today, Imran Khan would make a comeback. And that puts the Prime Minister in a tough spot. The last thing he needs is to look soft on India. It could cost him valuable support. Factor number two, the scale of international support. Pakistan is already importing supplies from Iran and Afghanistan, especially vegetables. If those supplies are able to cool the markets, Pakistan may not need imports from India. In other words, India is their last resort. Officials in New Delhi are discussing the possibility of extending assistance. You could have a decision soon. From a strategic and humanitarian perspective, this aid makes sense. It would reaffirm India's position in South Asia. First, there were assistance offered to Sri Lanka and now perhaps to Pakistan. It would send the right message to India's neighbors that unlike China, India helps. Secondly, it would reveal Pakistan's thought process. If they welcome the aid, it would give us clues about where Shehbaz Sharif stands, how he envisions his relationship with India. On Wednesday, he dropped some clues. Prime Minister Sharif responded to Prime Minister Modi's message on Twitter. Here's what he said. I'm quoting that post. I thank Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi for condolences over the human and material losses caused by floods. With their characteristic resilience, the people of Pakistan shall overcome the adverse effects of this natural calamity and rebuild their lives and communities. So no mention of aid. But this Twitter exchange is an important one. It is the closest that Prime Minister Modi and Shehbaz Sharif have come to an actual conversation. And that may not be the case for long, because later this month, both leaders will be together at the SCO summit in Uzbekistan. SCO stands for Shanghai Cooperation Organization. The summit is scheduled for September the 15th and 16th. Neither side has confirmed a meeting, but multiple reports claim it could happen on the sidelines. If Pakistan is truly interested in normalizing ties, if they actually want to reset, then financial aid is a good place to start. It is not political, it is unlikely to trigger public backlash, and most importantly, it will help the Pakistani people. Same with India. If New Delhi does provide assistance, chances are it will be material assistance like medicines or food or tents, which means there is no risk of subversion. The aid cannot be diverted elsewhere by the government. Like I said at the start, disasters have a way of bringing people together, and right now it is rubbing off on foreign policy. Normally, the public is hostile to India-Pakistan exchanges. But here in India and in Pakistan, both here in India and in Pakistan. But we've seen the destruction from the monsoon floods. The scale of this tragedy could insulate both leaders from the public fallout. This is a story we'll keep tracking for you. For the moment, we head to Portugal, which is making waves around the world. The story: Portugal's health minister resigned after a pregnant Indian tourist died in Lisbon. The Indian woman died of cardiac arrest while she was being transferred from one hospital to another. Would your health minister have resigned had this happened in your country? Take a look at this report.
This is Martha Temido. She is the health minister of Portugal, and she has recently put in her papers. The minister resigned because a pregnant woman from India died in Portugal. The deceased woman was 34 years old. She was on a leisure trip to Lisbon. When she complained of shortness of breath, the woman was rushed to a hospital, but the maternity ward was full, which meant that the Indian woman had to be moved elsewhere. She had a cardiac arrest on the way. The baby had to be delivered through an emergency C-section surgery, but the mother could not be saved. The news of the Indian tourist's death spread like wildfire. The health minister was already under a lot of fire, one because of shortage of doctors in the country. Medical staff have gone on summer vacations en masse, and authorities have not planned well for staff shortages. Two, because Temido had decided to close some emergency care services in the country. Again, because there just weren't enough doctors. Earlier too, 2 infants had died. Their mothers were transferred from one hospital to another and had to face long delays. The Indian woman's death was the final nail in the coffin. The health minister resigned within 5 hours of the incident. Think about it, a health minister of a country resigned because a pregnant foreign woman died. Now, how often does this happen? Never in countries like India, which is one of the reasons why this story is being widely shared in this part of the world. Is this a story about accountability, or is there more? Portugal is a democracy, and so is India. In both countries, the leaders and ministers are answerable to voters. They are supposed to be accountable. But never in the history of Indian democracy have we seen a minister resigning because of medical negligence. In India, medical negligence is often met with a sigh and followed by a consolatory phrase. You know, it happens. Fire in a hospital and 11 patients dead? It happens. Oxygen shortage kills 60 children. It happens. In Portugal, people instead chose to ask how. How could it happen? How could a pregnant woman not find a bed in Lisbon's largest hospital? How could a tourist, a mother-to-be, just die? The health minister faced so much criticism that she had to declare that she no longer has the conditions to exercise the position. And why just the people? Even the president had put out a statement in his official website. Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa has said he was awaiting Temido's resignation. This is an extraordinary story of accountability, of holding leaders to question. Portugal has given the world and world leaders a lot to think about.
The European Union has unveiled a new measure against Russia. Guess who it targets? Not Vladimir Putin, not his oligarchs, not even his gas companies or banks. The new measure targets ordinary Russian citizens. Let me explain. In 2007, Russia signed a visa agreement with Europe. The idea was to make travel easier. Russians could get visas from EU member states much faster. But on Wednesday, that agreement was scrapped.
First, full suspension of the European Union Russia visa facilitation agreement. Full suspension. Until now, it was partially suspended for special collectives, groups of people, officials and entrepreneurs, and now it's fully suspended. So the visas will be more difficult to get. But it will still be possible to get visas, but in a much reduced number. This with respect to the new visas.
Let me tell you what this means. Russians will now have to wait longer. They'll have to pay more and jump through more bureaucratic hoops for a visa. What about the existing ones? Around 12 million visas have already been issued to Russian citizens. Those visas will not be affected, but new ones will be extremely tough to get. Now, this policy was a half measure because, like always, the European Union was divided on what to do. Ukraine was asking it to completely ban Russian visitors, sort of like a travel ban. This demand was backed by members bordering Russia, like Finland, Estonia and Latvia, but others, like France and Germany, opposed it. So in the end, Europe decided on a half measure. Travel will not be banned, it will be made harder. How has Russia responded to this? The Kremlin called the decision ridiculous. It is also preparing a similar response against European citizens. So much for keeping the people out of this war. The fact is, such a move sets the wrong precedent, especially in Russia. Vladimir Putin is spinning the narrative on Western sanctions. He's painting Russia as the victim, and this move plays right into Putin's hands. Just think about it. European leaders keep saying that this is Putin's war, that Russian people do not support him. Well, if that's the case, why target Russian citizens? Many Russians have families in Europe, some have children studying there, or maybe business operations. How does stopping them end the war in Ukraine? The answer is it doesn't. It only reinforces the propaganda being pushed by Putin and his team that the West is out to harm Russian citizens. Also, what happens to political refugees? Many activists and students are opposed to Russia's war. They often flee to Europe to escape persecution. What happens to those dissidents? Will they also wait for months and pay more to get a visa? You see, sanctions are supposed to weaken the state, not the people. So targeting the oligarchs was fine. They were directly linked to Vladimir Putin. Targeting the gas companies was also fine because they were funding the war. But targeting the citizens is not fine. It doesn't weaken the state, it only weakens the people. Some EU members have gone beyond the joint proposal. They're issuing outright bans. Estonia has already done this. Finland, Latvia and Lithuania are planning to do the same. Makes you wonder, what is Europe thinking? Are they trying to pressure Putin via his people? And if so, good luck to them. Russia is not some vibrant democracy where public pressure will hurt Putin. He's ignored protests before and he'll do it again. So the current policy appears more emotional than rational. It also exposes the thought process of world leaders. International law seeks to protect civilians during war, but these leaders just don't seem to care. Putin is choking Europe's gas supply to hurt its people. He's using civilians as pawns in the larger war, and so is Europe. The ban on Russia's national carrier, and now this visa regime being tightened. All of it indicates a ruthless targeting of civilians. They're not paying with their lives, sure, but they are paying with their livelihoods. And it's on both sides of the divide, talking about livelihoods. Thousands of British pub owners are struggling. Come winter, they might not be able to keep their establishments open. What's the reason? The soaring energy prices. British pubs are paying through their nose like everyone else in the UK. Their energy bills have shot up by as much as 300%. The pubs are part of the British culture and identity. Will inflation destroy them? Here's the full story.
The Great British Pub is facing a crisis. Establishments like these are the quintessential part of British culture, but they could soon go bust. Russia's war in Ukraine has hit them hard. Energy bills have shot up massively due to shortages, and British pubs are unable to keep up. James Cuthbertson runs a prominent pub in London. He is thinking about closing his pub for the winter.
We've discussed ideas like closing for winter if it became unaffordable to run. Here we've just done a deal that we can just about make work, but these are changing every day, and one site's up for renewal at the end of November. So if that's not something sensible, what we're talking about, redundancies, we're talking about just closing, we're talking about giving the keys back. I think everything right now is on, unless there's intervention now, everything's on the table.
Pub owners like James want the government to step in. They are demanding price caps on their energy bills. James is not the only one making the demand. The future of thousands of British pubs is at stake.
6 of the UK's biggest pub and brewing companies have signed an open letter to the government, urging it to act in order to avoid what they say is real and serious, irreversible damage to the sector. Businesses, unlike households, operate without a regulated energy price cap, meaning their bills will be pushed even higher, possibly by 300%.
The British Beer and Pub Association has now stepped in. They claim energy bills have shot up astronomically. On average, pub owners are paying 150% more for energy. In some cases, bills have jumped more than 300%. Darren Nash of the Red Lion Inn in Cricklade is one of the many owners who are struggling to keep up.
We're around about £2,000 a month, give or take, for electricity. That's going to go up to about £1,000 a week. COVID was tough, but I don't think it's going to be anything as tough as what we've got coming. At least during COVID we could still do our takeaways and all that sort of thing, but that's all out of our hands now. It's all down to prices way above us.
The worst might be yet to come. The British energy regulator made an announcement last week. It expects energy bills for households to rise by as much as 80%. Once that happens, no one will be able to escape this energy crisis. The price cap is the obvious solution, but the British government is reluctant to take that step. They are waiting for the Conservative Party to pick a new Prime Minister. The current Chancellor of the Exchequer, Nadhim Zahawi, says he is working on relief measures, but he is unlikely to make a move before the change of guard at 10 Downing Street. The UK's political impasse is now hitting the economy, and British citizens are paying the price for the inaction of their leaders.
Hold on to the banisters. So with that, we come to the end of the week. Wait, are you confused? After all, it's only Thursday, so why am I calling the curtains on the week? Well, look around you. Who really goes to office on a Friday anymore? Well, I do, but I'm a sorry exception, I have to say, and so are most of my colleagues in the news business. But employees around the world are now wrapping up their work week on Thursdays. According to one estimate, only 30% of American employees swiped into office on Fridays. This is for the month of June. In the UK, staff are now going to office for 1.4 days a week. Before the pandemic, that number was 3.8 days a week. Even that, we say, is a luxury. Earlier too, Fridays were not work-heavy days. Most offices would set the mood by allowing employees to wear casuals to work on Fridays. You could walk in wearing denims and polo t-shirts. Lunches on Fridays were long, and the second half was almost always free of meetings. Also, there would be post-work drinks, and Fridays were always bookmarked for office parties. But now employees have decided to skip Fridays altogether. Forget about casual trips to work. They would much rather be at home. Why, you ask? Well, for starters, employees have mastered the art of working from home. Why drive all the way to office when you can just get into a video call from home? The logic is quite strong, I have to say. Also, the idea of a long weekend means employees can join calls from airports and weekend getaways. So that's skipping office on Friday for the sake of work-life balance. And all of this is good for employees, but not so much for employers, because work from home comes with its share of productivity loss. All the more when the weekend mood has set in early. You must have heard of Frasers Group. It's one of the UK's largest retail businesses. So Frasers had a Home Friday policy. It was called Frasers Friday. Recently, they scrapped it. The company said some employees were quote-unquote not treating Friday as a working day. One British architecture firm said Home Fridays saw a lot of workers going MIA, missing in action. Also, not all work can be done from home, and in such cases, the work suffers on Home Fridays. The pandemic has been hard on businesses as it is, and now the cost of an entire workday vanishing from the calendar every week can be too much for most companies to bear. So obviously, employers do not like this idea and this new normal. An unofficial 4-day work week is hurting their output. The challenge is to get employees out of their couches and into the cubicles on Fridays. How do you do that? You won't believe if I told you how some companies are trying to do that. They're tempting employees with food. The office parties are now starting much earlier on Fridays. Have you noticed there's a new trend of free lunches on Fridays in some places? There are also more frequent special catered events on Fridays. Some of you may have also noticed canteens serving special menus on Friday. And if you thought that was HR being generous, well, you may want to think again. Chances are this food is a bait to bring you to work on Fridays. The taco tucks are your employer's way of pouring hot sauce over Home Fridays. Not all companies are offering baits though. Some are accepting the idea of a no-show Friday. You know, as long as Monday to Thursday employees put in extra hours, they're fine with it. Then there's a third group of companies which is trying to make Fridays easier on you. Citigroup, for example, has declared Fridays Zoom-free. Same with KPMG. It is promising a no-camera Friday. Plus, you can now clock out at 3 p.m. But for that, you must show up at work. Some employees are actually happy to do that. The Wall Street Journal recently profiled some people who said that they go to office on Fridays because no one else does. And being in an empty office allows them to do a little stretch, listen to music on speakers, have the office space to themselves. Well, those employees fall in the exception club, like me and some of you. But the larger picture that we're looking at is of a definite shake-up in the work culture. Thursday is the new Friday, and Friday the new Saturday. And you can safely blame this on the pandemic. It is the Wuhan virus that set in motion a drastic change in work culture. It is also the Wuhan virus that made Thursdays, as in today, the last day of the work week. Well, does that mean I'm suggesting you take a day off tomorrow? Well, absolutely not. You decide for yourself. We're taking a look at what else is making news across the world. This is Gravitas Global Headlines.
Russia's defense ministry said they thwarted a Ukrainian attempt to capture the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant as a team of the UN nuclear watchdog visits the plant amid shelling in nearby areas. Rebels in the northern region of Tigray claim that Ethiopian and Eritrean forces have launched a massive joint offensive against the Tigray People's Liberation Front. Wife of the former Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak has been sentenced to 10 years in prison over bribery charges, a week after her husband was sent to prison for corruption linked to a multi-billion-dollar scandal. Pakistan's anti-terror court extended the interim bail for former Prime Minister Imran Khan till September 12th. In a case involving comments made by him about a judge involved in the detention of an official in his party. The International Monetary Fund has agreed to a conditional $2.9 billion bailout for crisis-hit Sri Lanka. German airline group Lufthansa has cancelled out almost all of its flights to and from its main German hubs in Munich and Frankfurt after pilots called for a strike. In Peru's capital, Lima, LGBTQ rights activists protested outside the prosecutor's office. Protesters demanded that an autopsy be performed on a Peruvian transgender man who died earlier this month after being detained on the Indonesian tourist island of Bali. Thousands of fish are getting killed by an unprecedented red tide in the San Francisco Bay Area. The red tide is also affecting other marine life. The carcasses are causing a foul odor that experts say could get worse during this weekend's expected heat wave. 23-time singles Grand Slam champion Serena Williams knock out second seed Anett Kontaveit 7-6, 2-6, 6-2 to march into the third round of the US Open. The 40-year-old is rolling back the clock in what is perceived as her last tournament before retirement. Erling Haaland continues his blistering start to a life in the Premier League as the striker scored his second hat-trick in as many games to help Manchester City thrash newly promoted Nottingham Forest 6-0.
That is a wrap. We're leaving you with Gravitas images. Thanks for watching.